At first, the sight of so many bands and wheels and springs in constant motion was very frightful.
The cotton boom of the early 19th century fueled the first large-scale manufacturing in the United States. Textile mills began to spring up across the Northeast, and towns grew up around them to house their workers. This innovation not only changed the textile industry, it transformed the social landscape as well.
With the development of the carding machine, the spinning frame, and the power loom, and the growth of textile production in factory settings, we begin to see the birth of a female labor force. They're beginning to see possibilities. They're beginning to see the possibilities for consumer goods that weren't there before. They're beginning to have some questions about what the possibilities are in the countryside for them, whether or not there really are opportunities for them. They're going to the city to earn money for themselves, sometimes to help their families, almost certainly to put away something toward their own marriages later in life, at a time when families are beginning to have a bit of trouble assuring all their children a place in the countryside.
In 1813, Francis Cabot Lowell, a clothing manufacturer, returned to Boston energized by an invention he had seen while on a business trip in England. He reconstructed a power loom from memory, then went on to establish several textile factories along the banks of the Merrimack River. The town of Lowell, Massachusetts, was born. By 1830, more than 6,000 young women were employed in 8 different mills in Lowell alone. These women, most of them between the ages of 16 and 23, labored in hot, poorly ventilated workrooms, surrounded by noisy machines.
For this effort, standing on their feet 12, 13 hours a day, they made in the 1830s maybe $3.50, $3.25 a week. So they made 4 or 5 cents an hour would be what they were paid. Out of that $3 and something a week, they'd pay $1.25 a week for their room and board in the boarding house. But this meant that they could save $1.75, maybe $2 a week. And over time, some of them might develop a bit of a savings account in the local savings bank and have some money to take back to them when they were done.
Harriet Hanson Robinson came to Lowell in 1834 when her mother took a job running a company boarding house. At the age of 10, Harriet went to work in one of the Lowell factories as a bobbin girl.
I can see myself now racing down the alley between the spinning frames, carrying in front of me a bobbin box bigger than I was. We mites had to be very swift so as not to keep the spinning frames stopped long.
Harriet worked her way up from bobbin girl to tending a spinning frame and then to a better-paying skilled position as a drawing-in girl.
We drew in, one by one, the threads of the warp through the harness and the reed, and so made the beams ready for the weaver's loom.
In 1834 and 1836, the female workers banded together to protest attempts to lower their wages.
When the day came on which the girls were to turn out, those in the upper rooms started first, and so many of them left that our mill was at once shut down. Then, when the girls in my room stood irresolute, I became impatient and started on ahead. I marched out and was followed by the others.
But by 1840, the fledgling women's labor movement at Lowell was undercut by an increasing supply of immigrant workers.
There was a ready supply of Irish immigrant workers to come into the mills. And as the Irish come into the mills more and more, you begin to see the mills changing character. As the mills grow between, let's say, the 1840s and 1860s, they don't tend to build as many boarding houses. So more and more of the workers are expected to find their own homes somewhere in Lowell. More and more of them come to Lowell as whole families, with the women working in the mills, perhaps the men working on canals or doing unskilled labor in Lowell, so that as the wages relatively go down and as the workforce is transformed from a rural migrant labor force to an immigrant labor force, what particularly distinguished Lowell from other places begins to disappear.
In 1848, Harriet, at age 24, left her job in the mill to marry William Robinson, a Lowell newspaper editor. They remained in town. Many Lowell girls, having tasted city life, chose not to return to the hard rural existence of their parents.
You find a number of women who had been mill operatives become active in the women's rights movement that evolved, so that there definitely are people who I would say became familiar with the idea that women could have a public presence and could protest ill treatment. And they carried that over from the class issues that they first addressed while working in the mills to more political and social issues for women generally in American society.
Woman is never thought to be out of her sphere at home, in the nursery, in the kitchen, over a hot stove, cooking from morning till evening, over a wash tub, or toiling in a cotton factory 14 hours per day. But let her once step out, plead the cause of right and humanity, plead the wrongs of her slave sister of the South or of the operative of the North, and a cry is raised against her, out of her sphere.